What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jonathan. Ow! It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for one-off. Yeah, I actually had a lot of ideas this week that I was kind of mulling over, but the one I really ended up wanting to do, and I chose, was another Caves of Essence. So this is kind of a quote-unquote part 2. These will all be sort of connected, but not necessarily sequential. Well, I mean, they will be It's not a direct follow-up from the last one, as you'll be able to tell. But I enjoyed it, and I'll talk more after, but let's get into the one-off.
The Caves of Essence, The Omnikey, by Jonathan Howe. Read to you by Jonathan Howe. This is the University Museum's main hallway, the docent explained to the group. Gray stood in the back looking around. Lana had been forcibly removed from the pool of essence before they were able to make it this far, but together they'd been able to gather enough clues leading them here. He observed the large obelisk in the center of the tall stone hallway. It was a similar color to the gray walls. Overall, the entire scene needed more light. It was natural for Essence, though, to have unrealistic settings. He moved up to the stone monolith, ignoring the warning cries of the docent. "You need to step back," they called to him. Gray ran along the stone, searching for imperfections. Whatever artifact wouldn't be easy to find. This specific pool was more than 10 caverns deep. They'd reached a point in which artifacts required at least a week's worth of reality to find, and months of dedication in the essence. Gray had been on this hunt for a year. A hand reached out, taking him by the shoulder. He turned, expecting the docent. He hadn't expected Gus Mathiasen. Gray tried to pull away, but the man's grip was iron. He could see an anchor in the man's hand, some artifact from another cave giving him power. "Up, up, up," he said in his silky voice. "No need to be nervous." "Shut up, Gus," Gray hissed. "If you're here to take the artifact, just eject me already." Gus grinned slyly. "You know, I really want to, Gray. Your last little stunt wasted valuable time. However, in order to make it up, I'm just going to use the knowledge you gleaned in the meantime." "And why don't I just eject myself?" Gray asked. Gus shrugged. "We both know that you want this artifact over any other." The words hung in the air, unchallenged. "So, you're going to lead us to it. You'll get to see it and watch as we take it right out from under your fingertips." Gus giggled a quick maniacal laugh. Gray ground his teeth, reaching up for where his reality anchor hung. "Nope," Gus said. In a flash, both Gray's hands were turned to stone. "You don't get to do anything but speak." Gus let go of his shoulders and stepped back. Gray tried lifting his stony hands, only able to bring them up to shoulder level. He growled, looking down again. Atop the obelisk, he noticed a vent the size of a paper. Taking note of the oddity, he read a mural on the wall and noted other statues in the main hall. The docent had moved on, maybe even phasing out of existence. Their part in the experience was over. The mural depicted a man dissolving. "Do you think we need to sacrifice someone to the obelisk?" Gus asked, stepping up to view the mural as well. "That dissolved man is being eaten in this mural." "That is unlikely," Gray admitted. "Very few essence trips continue after a person's perspective dies." He looked to the other pieces in the hall, hoping for a clue as to what the dissolving could be. He had a good theory about what to do after, but he didn't want to alert Gus. It might be his only chance to escape and reach the artifact. Across the hall, members of Gus's gang searched as well. One stood by an altar of sorts, inspecting the platform. "Then again," Gray said, walking in its direction. He moved past the man, Gus following closely behind. The small dais held iconography of wind. Gray stepped up onto it. A gentle breeze blew up, seemingly out of the pedestal. "Do you want us to kill you?" Gus asked. "That can be arranged." Gray searched the mural on the wall for another clue. The man, before dissolving, seemed to be holding on to something. Gray tried to move his fingers. They didn't budge. Gus narrowed his eyes, turning back to study the mural as well. "Welp, it's now or never," Gray thought. He made a gamble, slamming his hands down onto the stone dais. Everyone spun, facing the loud sound. Gray gritted through the pain. His stone hands cracked. Rather than fall apart, however, they gained mobility. "What?" Gus cried, reaching for his anchor with one hand and Gray for the other. Gray smiled, grasping at nothing. His hands closed on something, a feeling washing over his whole body. One moment he stood on the dais, next moment Gray was the wind. Gus's hand passed through where he'd been. Gray blew up, swirling once, then immediately he flew into the vent at the top of the obelisk. The tunnel veered down, shooting Gray below the floor into a new chamber. He didn't let himself touch the ground, not wanting to lose his speed advantage. Gray spun, searching for a route. Before him lay two paths. Figures, he thought. I'll get to try one and Gus will take the other. After a long year, it all comes down to luck. He inspected the paths, trying to tell which might lead to the artifact. Something about them nagged his brain. Identical routes looked too commonplace. In all of his years of essence diving, nothing was ever this simple, especially not the path to an artifact so well hidden. While he spun indecisively, another gust of wind entered the chamber. It didn't have a face, but he knew it to be Gus. The wind spun, seeing Gray. It flew at him, passing through. In the moment they touched, Gray could hear Gus in his mind. "I've won, Gray. I have men who can follow. You might as well flee while we can't get to you." They separated. Gray thought quickly. Gus's words had sparked an idea in his mind. He flew into the other wind, preparing his lie. "This isn't over," Gray said to Gus's mind. "You still have to exit the pool. I'll do something on the reality side." Without another word, Gray shot towards the hole he'd entered from. The tunnel shot him up and up and up. Gray popped out, not in the chamber with the obelisk, but on the roof of the museum. As he touched it, he morphed into himself again, albeit without clothes. That happened often in essence. He didn't have time. Gray reached up to his necklace, which held his reality anchor. He pulled from the power it held and an artifact of an earlier pool. Gray touched the chimney he'd just exited and melted it into a solid, closed lid. That'll buy me time, he thought. I'll have to thank Gus for reminding me to backtrack. A rule of essence was that no place could ever be returned to. No matter where you'd been and how you'd gotten around, every path led to some place new. Gray started turning the roof over. He looked down other chimneys, under shingles, and even down off the edge to the ground below. Nothing stood out to him. As he turned in frustration, his foot struck something. Gray stopped, looking down. In the soot, next to a chimney, was a dark iron key. He reached down, taking the artifact in a gentle grip. A year ago, when he and Lana had entered, they'd heard tell of a key that could unlock any door. Like all pools of essence, it was something told about in the world's myths. One myth spoke of a key that could unlock the doors separating life and death. Now in his hands, Gray held the very key, the Omnikey. His jaw quivered and his eyes watered. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He squeezed his eyelids tight, holding the key to his chest. Tears ran down his cheeks. He didn't even open his eyes. Gray reached back up to his anchor, grabbing hold and thinking of reality and the cave Lana was waiting in. When he exited the jumble of senses that was the pool of essence, Gray found himself surrounded. Gus stood triumphantly pointing a laser sword at him. "Thanks for all that hard work," Gus said. "Now, give me the Omnikey." Gray stepped back, fighting the pull of the essence. "You have nowhere to go but back in. When you return, it will bring you here again. Give me the key and we can end this peacefully." Gray took another step back. He placed the key in a back pocket. His clothes were back, and he looked for Lana. She stood, the Queen's blade drawn, surrounded by Gus's men. Her skin was the striped black and yellow of a bee, and wings sprouted from her back. She had their packs by her feet, ready to go. "Gray, you can't escape," Gus said, in a low, menacing voice. Gray reached up to his anchor, pulling out a metal cylinder. Gus's eyes went wide, and he lunged with his laser sword. Gray twisted the segments of the cylinder, teleporting next to Lana. He scooped up the bags. Lana took the cylinder in her hand and twisted against Gray's grip. The pair popped out of the cave and into their rental office space. Gray dropped everything, falling to the floor. "That was too close," Lana said. "I had to fend off some of Gus's men for 3 days. Gray stood on shaky legs, hugging Lana tight. She stopped for a moment before returning his gesture. You got it, I assume? He nodded. Tears flowed freely. I finally have it. I can go after them. He felt Lana stiffen. I'm not sure you should, Gray. We don't know what happens after death. True, Gray admitted, stepping back from Lana. He pulled the small iron key out of his pocket. But with this, I can find out. Now, all he needed to do was return to the gates of death.
And we're back. So, yeah. If you haven't figured out by now, I think I mentioned it kind of last time, but the Caves of Essence are kind of like my, hey, did I ever have a weird dream and like what happened in it? And okay, first of all, I never directly translate what happens in my dreams all the time. But you will notice some common trends. So one of them is, as Gray said, no location can ever really be returned to. Because like how often in dreams do you actually go back to somewhere you just were? Like even if you walk out the door, you walk back in and it's a different place. That's going to be a trend. I know it's going to be weird for some people, but like the random nudity things, maybe it's just me, but I think it's not just me. I've heard people where like in dreams things happen. I legitimately the other day had a dream where I can tell you the point where I was clothed, I stood up and I was not clothed. And it just happens all the time. So maybe that's just a thing in my dreams, but like, again, the Caves of Essence are like dream states that they go into and are harvesting artifacts out of. So I'm going to be taking a bunch of themes from things that happen in my dreams and probably other people's. Again, you might not be brave enough to admit that online, but it's a dream, whatever. So that's just what the Caves of Essence are going to be with a little bit of story intertwined. I will continue this because I did kind of leave a little cliffhanger at the end. So that will eventually be fulfilled. But yeah, I hope you guys keep coming back to enjoy. If you like this, share it with your friends, family, loved ones. Hit like, subscribe. Seems like pretty much it. Anyway, neat. Okay, bye.